I hope that you're having a beautiful holiday break that includes serene moments for doing old-fashioned things like reading. A landmark study released in August revealed that the proportion of Americans who read for pleasure almost every day has plummeted 43% since 2004. Only 1 in 6 Americans today describe themselves as daily readers. How much does this matter? According to neuroscientist Maryanne Wolf, a leading expert on the reading brain, this is a big deal.
Literacy changes the circuit of the brain of an individual, which collectively changes the way that society thinks, which changes the way that society works in a democracy or a form of government. So the question is, how will the human species learn to preserve its best processes of thinking?
This conversation with Maryanne, recorded in 2023, is one of our favorites internally. She is just bursting with a contagious passion for the act of reading, a healthy contagion, if there ever was one. It's worth noting that reading physical books in our increasingly distracted digital age is becoming an ever more radical act, or what the author David Ulin calls an act of resistance in a landscape of distraction. If that's true, then we at the Next Big Idea Club are a kind of joyful dissident group. We'd love to invite you to join the revolution. You can learn more at nextbigideaclub.com.
The Subaru Share the Love event is on from November 20th to January 2nd. During this event, Subaru donates to charities like Meals on Wheels, and so far has supported the delivery of nearly 5 million meals to our aging neighbors. When you purchase or lease a new vehicle during the 2025 Subaru Share the Love event, Subaru and its retailers will make a minimum $300 donation to charity. Visit Subaru.com/share to learn more.
Oh, Hilton stay, oh, Hilton stay. Your beds are soft and cozy. No lumpy couch, no stiff futon, no shower line at crack of dawn. Oh, Hilton stay, a holiday you're saving.
When you want holiday comfort you can count on, it matters where you stay. This season, enjoy spacious, comfortable rooms and friendly service when you book with Hilton instead. Hilton for the stay.
Maryanne Wolf, welcome to the Next Big Idea podcast.
What a pleasure, Rufus, to be with you. For all kinds of reasons, I look forward to this conversation and the directions you are going to guide us in.
I am so happy to be talking with you today. I have been deep in your last 2 books, Proust and the Squid, The Story and Science of the Reading Brain, and your latest, Reader Come Home, The Reading Brain in the Digital World. And your books are both a powerful argument for the importance of reading and an expression of the joy of writing and reading because they're beautifully written. Let's make a case at the opening here for the urgency of this topic in this moment. I mean, I'm sure there are people thinking, oh, reading, that sort of is not the most exciting topic, but it is so critical. I feel this personally. I have 3 boys who seem to believe that reading is a backup system if the power goes out. But you have persuaded me through your books that this is important not just for our children, but for the future of democracy, for our nation, for our species.
Yeah.
And I've witnessed firsthand, raising 3 sons, that we're in this extraordinary moment where the ways that we learn, the ways that we communicate, the ways that we ingest information are fundamentally changing. And why does this matter? Because reading, I've learned from reading your books, is a kind of cultural innovation that we've adopted in the last several thousand years that has rewired our brains. And if we are deprioritizing reading right now, and there's evidence that we are, this means the brains of future generations are effectively being wired differently and maybe not for the better. Do you see this as an important moment, as a hinge moment?
Oh, absolutely. And here is what I will do to talk to your sons and mine. For them to understand and appreciate the digital screen world is a wonderful tool that is necessary for their existence. At the same time, they don't understand what that is potentially disrupting or diminishing from what are the benefits of the other medium. So I am asking all of us in this hinge moment to understand what each medium does to change our brain. And here we come back to your initial point. Literacy changes the circuit of the brain of an individual, which collectively changes the way that society thinks, which over time changes the way that society works, which eventually over time changes our species and how our species thinks, acts, and behaves to one another. So the question of whether reading is important is eclipsed by the question of how will the human species learn to preserve its best processes of thinking as it expands and elaborates that very circuit with new processes.
I believe the first line of the first chapter of Proust and the Squid is, "We were never born to read." You go on to say, human beings invented reading only a few thousand years ago. And with this invention, we rearranged the very organization of our brain, which in turn expanded the ways we were able to think, which altered the intellectual evolution of our species. So it's an argument that I had never really seen assembled in this way, because I think we all know that like evolution happens over hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years, not a few thousand years. So language comes naturally to a child who's born into a family, but the ability to read, we all know as parents, does not just happen by itself, right? So your argument, as I understand it, is that this is actually requires a really deeply intensive, immersive process of studying and training over the course of a decade or more to become expert readers. And in the process of doing that, we're rewiring our brains. And this process, which began some 6,000 years ago, really came to fruition a couple thousand years ago with the Greek alphabet, which had some advantages, seems to have been an enormous benefit to our species in terms of the kind of thinking and communication it made possible. Do you want to talk a little bit about, I had no idea that the 26-letter alphabet was itself a kind of open system that all of a sudden made it possible for all the spoken languages to be written down.
It's an enormous intellectual epiphany to be able to transcribe any language with characters and keep it as an historical memory that would be democratically available. We could now preserve and didn't have to rediscover the wheel generation after generation by carrying on through oral language the traditions and the body of knowledge. So we could have this body, our corpus, preserved, and that became a platform for going beyond it.
We tend to think of reading as a singular activity, but in fact, there are many levels or degrees of depth, you might say, of reading. Can you tell us about deep reading and the miraculous beauty of what happens in the brain when we read deeply?
Yes. Rufus, I'm so glad you asked that question. it all comes back to the fact that when we learn to read, we make this most basic circuit that connects visual and linguistic areas with cognitive areas and then affective areas as we elaborate over time. But we can either develop that circuit and elaborate it with everything that we read. Alberto Manguel always talks about the geometric progression that happens in reading from one book, preparing ourselves to read more deeply another. Well, the brain actually does that with neuronal networks of connectivity that connect more and more cognitively sophisticated processes to that very basic circuit. Over time, we begin to connect all that we know, the background knowledge, and use analogical reasoning to compare it to whatever new text or new information we're getting. And there's a kind of frontal lobe dance, if you will, that's going on between what we know and what we're encountering. But that's just the beginning, because in that dance, the background knowledge is happening and feeding the center, but we're using it for really important, sophisticated processes. And I say this to your sons, to my sons, to society. We are using inference. We are using deduction and induction with that, if you will, that exchange of what we know and what we're learning. We're making inferences. Is this true? Or is this misinformation? Or worst of all, these days, disinformation. We have the ability through these deep reading processes to add our own background knowledge, our inference, our deductions, our inductions to make a critical analysis of what is read. There may be little more important for a democracy than to have truly critical analytic citizens. So when we citizens of a society read something, do we deploy those very important deep reading processes that give us the ability to discern the truth and attempt to understand the thoughts and feelings of others? And you know this, Rufus, but this wonderful interview that former President Barack Obama had with one of my favorite novelists, Marilynne Robinson, he had an interview with her in which he said, I consider you, I think he used the term ambassador of empathy. And what she said was the tendency towards seeing others as enemies, and not to read so that we understand others, but the tendency to see others as enemies is the greatest threat to democracy today.
I was so moved by the quote you have in the book from Barack Obama in his conversation with Marilynne Robinson, in which he talks about what he learned about being a citizen from novels. Obama said it has to do with empathy. It has to do with being comfortable with the notion that the world is complicated and full of grays, but there's still truth to be found, and that you have to strive for that and work for that. And the notion that it's possible to connect with someone else, even though they're very different from you, right? So I do think that this is something that, people can debate the relative merits of different genres, of different mediums of communication, but it does feel like novels in particular are extraordinary empathy exercises, more so than maybe any other medium.
I can't agree with you more. And I say that from the standpoint of someone who, like your sons and like so many in our society, I truly love film. But the novel gives us a chance to pause in the moment, where the film, the screen, is always rushing us along into the next thought, the next feeling, the next scene. But the novel, like few other mediums, it allows us to pause in the midst of that character's feelings and
Yes.
to experience and identify it like few other experiences.
It is this incredible kind of rigorous workout in, as we were saying, the ability to get inside the head of another
Yes.
human, and that Barack Obama and you and I and many others think is critical to democracy at some level, right? Is that we're able to really inhabit, to the extent that we can, the thoughts and minds and experiences of other people. Getting back to deep reading, you quote a few times Marcel Proust, who calls reading that fertile miracle of communication affected in solitude.
Yes.
Our wisdom begins where that of the author leaves off.
Yes.
Right. So this notion that it's a duet, it's a dance, and that this is how reading is maybe different from film, maybe different from, right, some of these other mediums of communication, in that because it is a somewhat low fidelity medium, because not everything is contained in the words, there is room and space to react and fill in the blanks and push back and have a kind of dialogue with that which we read.
You are just putting your thumbprint, your intellectual thumbprint, Rufus, on the heart of what Proust was really trying to tell us. Very few people understand what he really got the heart of, which is Proust was saying, we leave the wisdom of the author behind to discover our own. That's the heart of it all. And, as much as I love film and as much as I'm on the digital screen out of both intentionality and, there's efficiency, I do not enter and pause in that sanctuary. I think even the word pause, we go there, we stop, we think, we take the measure of ourselves along with the measure of that author's words, and we are changed. That doesn't happen as easily in other genres.
To read this way, it seems to be that it's important to give ourselves permission to go slowly. I mean, quickly, perhaps, when we're excited. I love this notion that you talk about Italo Calvino's use of the Latin expression festina lente, hurry slowly, right?
I love that.
When we get in this, as I'm speaking to you now, I'm getting goosebumps because when we get in these transported moments of reading deeply, we're rushing excitedly to the next sentence and then slowing down and rolling it over and reading it again.
Yeah.
And it's I think of how people used to type with typewriters when writing the spaces between the lines, so you could go back and write in between the lines. And I thought you have to read slowly enough so there is space between the lines for you to think.
Beautiful.
When I was in the 1980s, when I was in high school, my parents put me in a speed reading class. They thought this would be good for me, right? Yeah. And where they would train you and force you to read at these incredible speeds. And it was kind of interesting because you would actually find that you could, skim very quickly.
Right.
But I later had to unlearn the habit because I realized, like, wait a second, what is the objective here? Is the objective to get the information, to get the gist of the information, or are you trying to fully absorb and interact with it? Are you trying to let the words baste, to let them marinate? And so, I mean, obviously, you need to have text that's worthy of that kind of treatment.
Right.
But I think that part of what I see as a sort of beautiful thrust of your argument is that this particular kind of reading is also a kind of thinking and a form of learning that is really critical to developing human beings who can think critically and empathetically. And we need this for our society. We want this for our children, but more than that, we need it as a species to be able to think this way. And there's evidence that our ability to do this is eroding. Is that accurate?
Yes, it is unfortunately one of the things I would tell your sons, as I've told mine. The largest meta-analysis that's ever been done has been a compilation of over 50 studies in which, from the year 2000 to the year 2017, in which they simply looked at any study that had a comparison of the same story or text in the two mediums, print and screen, and then asked comprehension questions that got out. Did the person understand this, the plot, the sequence of details, etc.? And the results showed incredibly that print was truly superior for that kind of comprehension. But Ackerman in Israel then looked at what these young adults thought themselves about what was better for them. And they would say, oh, we know we did better on the screen because we can read faster. And you see, there is this unquestioned assumption that speed, I think David Ulin said this, that speed is illumination, when speed is actually often skipping to the gist of the information, which is all we need in a lot of things that we do, like email. We don't need to have every word. But if it is anything that is worth its real use of deep reading, what we have done is absolutely skipped beauty. We have skipped the elaboration, the historical elaboration of arguments that led to this particular viewpoint. We have skipped the details that might even, in some novels, portray the very resolution of the mystery the whole work had been building towards. And there are works in which there are pauses that if you miss them, you've missed that the protagonist just, in one book, one short story I'll never forget, if you miss this one ellipsis, just an ellipsis, you don't know that this villain has impregnated the heroine. An ellipsis. You missed an ellipsis.
Yeah.
No, but
you can't speed read that short story.
But it is the fact that we are living in such an over-networked, speeded society and culture, and I'm absolutely part of it.
Yes.
That we
all are.
We can't remember where we left that heart of reading, that interiority, that sanctuary. We know it's in there because we learned it.
Yes.
But we, in neuroscience, you have this platitude, use it or lose it. We lose our way. We lose our way back. And that's why my book was called Reader Come Home. So many people don't even read it enough to know why it's got that title. But it's the home that I don't want people to forget their way back to.
How did Maryanne find her way back home when she too lost her way? That story right after the break.
Here's my 30-second story with Guinness. As soon as my sister and I get home for the holidays, we don't even unpack. We head straight to our pub. The bartender already knows our order, Guinness and fries. We laugh all night, catch up with old friends, and walk home with faces sore from smiling. It's one of my favorite nights of the year. That was my 30-second story with Guinness.
Guinness Draft Stout. Please enjoy responsibly. Imported by Diageo Beer Company, USA, New York, New York.
This is Jason Momoa, and I'll be your finance professor today. Welcome to Banking Smarter 101 with Chime. Bam! First lesson, sign up for Chime and set up direct deposit. You'll be joining millions of members banking fee-free. Second lesson, get cash back on eligible purchases while building credit and a higher APY on your savings. That's how you bank smarter this season. Fa-la-la-la-la, class dismissed. Join Chime today.
Chime is a financial technology company, not a bank. Banking services and a secure Chime Visa credit card provided by the Bancorp Bank N.A. A or Stride Bank NA, members FDIC. Optional services and products may have fees or charges. Details at chime.com/fees-info. With a qualifying direct deposit, earn 1.5% cash back on eligible secured Chime Visa credit card purchases. On-time payment history may have a positive impact on your credit score. Results may vary. APY means annual percentage yield. Learn about credit building and more at chime.com.
David Hewland, who you just quoted,
Yes.
had another wonderful quote in your book. He said, to read, we need a certain kind of silence.
Exactly.
That seems increasingly elusive in our over-networked society.
Yes.
And it's not contemplation we desire, but an odd kind of distraction masquerading as being in the know. And he goes on to say, reading is an act of resistance in a landscape of distraction.
I remember that quote so well.
Isn't that wonderful? But I feel this, it's a radical act, it feels like, right?
It is a radical act.
To read a long book, start to finish, it feels wildly anachronistic and an act of resistance, perhaps.
And do you know what my sons wanted the title of my book to be?
I'm dying to know.
TLDR.
Clearly, we both have colorful conversations with our children at the dinner table on this topic of reading. We also have to say, to be fair, that we're all struggling
everyone
now,
is.
Right? In this digital age, with having this kind of silence that David Hewland talks about, the certain kind of silence we need. The cognitive patience is another term you use, right? The cognitive patience to do this kind of deep reading we're talking about. And you had your own experience, didn't you? When you went back to read one of your favorite authors, Hermann Hesse.
Yes. In the Hermann Hesse, I knew everything, I knew it was one of my favorite books. I wasn't going to be surprised, so I could really just enter it, I thought. Instead, it was almost paralyzing my cerebral cortex to try to get the rhythm of his prose, which is dense, it's labyrinthine, it's sometimes nauseatingly circuitous, and I couldn't read it. I was so upset with myself. And I said in the book, I said, why in the world did anybody ever give him the Nobel Prize for Literature?
Right. Well, you didn't like it. You thought, well, maybe I was wrong. Maybe
it.
Yeah.
And here it had been one of my favorite books. The moral, however, was I discovered I couldn't immerse myself. I couldn't. When I'm telling people to find their way back home, I was lost in my my own digital bleed over from the dominant reading mode, which is get the information fast, efficiently, and move on. And you can't do that with some novels. Some novels you can, fine. I do that on an airplane with a Kindle. Nothing against that. It's a relaxation of the mind. But for the immersive quality, in which we really do enter others and we enter other thoughts and feelings that can elicit our own, we have to have this patience that I myself have lost, regained. I had to discipline myself for 2 weeks and 20 minutes a day. And then finally I came to the point where it was like coming back home. I rediscovered myself. But Rufus, you have to keep disciplining yourself. I have found that if I bookend my day with really an effort to enter even a paragraph or a page of theology or spiritual or philosophical reading, but something that demands nothing but my patience, nothing but my thinking. And I begin that day, and it reminds me of how, and I really mean this, what a little ant we human beings are. We're going to spend the rest of our day thinking how important we are and how important all the things we have to do are, and we rush through them, and we're distracted constantly, and then we come back and we do something, we think, oh, this is marvelous, aren't we great? We really need to come to that place where we're not the center of the world, but rather we see the world and we try on humbly other viewpoints, humbly entering sometimes even the spiritual domain in which we feel glimpses of the transcendent, glimpses of what it is to think about the highest thoughts. But it requires absolute slowing down and leaving the world behind.
I think of it almost as a form of meditation.
Oh, it is.
But it's more interesting than meditation for
yeah,
me.
That's true.
Well, the great irony is that we're reading more than ever right now. I think you say 50,000 to 100,000 words per day, which is almost like the length of a book, right? I mean, that's an extraordinary amount of reading, but it's mostly not deep reading, right? It's a different kind of reading.
Very little of it is. And that's a piece of what happened to deep reading right there, because all of us are so bombarded by information, are so easily distracted by the 1,000 profiteers who are trying to take our distraction and earn something from it or use it. Because of all of that, we can't help but use skimming. And then we miss Italo Calvino's plea to us to realize that, the true author is doing everything they can to find the most perfect expression for their best thought. Well, we miss all of that. And then the publishers, they realize, well, we can't read that much deeply, so the things get shorter, less dense. And I don't mean just novels. I mean, even our scientific articles are becoming shorter, less devoted to the historical argumentation. And then the authors who need to be published are changing how they write. And then what happens, and this is going full circle back to what you call that hinge moment, we change. We're reading what we're given. And it has changed because of how we learn to read with all that information. So the defense strategy and the novelty reflex that we have, and this sense of being overwhelmed, which pushes us to use these familiar silos of information that just confirm our original bias, therefore we don't take perspectives of others, we end up impoverished, shallow readers. And that's the danger.
I'm now going to take on the role, Maryanne, of being a devil's advocate here and engaging you in a bit of debate, because although we clearly are capable of finishing each other's sentences on this topic, but I think it's fascinating to go back to this moment when Socrates was telling Plato that the transition from the oral to written language threatens critical thought. It threatens a culture of dialogue that is critical for us to be able to think clearly. Socrates mercilessly attacked those who, quote, think like papyrus rolls, being neither able to answer your questions nor to ask themselves. You write, Socrates did not fear reading. He feared superfluity of knowledge and its corollary, superficial understanding.
Yeah.
Which is amazing because that's exactly what we fear today, right? There's too much information. We're concerned about superficial understanding. So I can't help but raise the question, will we always feel a sense of nostalgia and loss when our modes of communication change?
No. So my real argument is that it is not a binary print versus screen. And so I ask all of us, do not ever think about either or, but rather what is best for the purpose of what you're reading. And there are individual differences, there are developmental differences, but I will ask everyone, until we have still more knowledge about how to have our generation steeped in both, I plea for all of us to consider how to preserve that deep reading brain in the next generation so that it can be used across mediums and with intentionality, so that we don't end up really unidimensionally being a video culture. And I love the some of the research on what it's doing for eye-hand coordination, for speed of, decision making. All that's fine. But what is it doing for true comprehension, for those deep reading, critical analytic processes? Show me that data. And I can show you, at least till this point, that it is going to demand that until we know better how to have the system redress its own weaknesses, and that is going on, until we know how to do that, build deep reading brains with print for 10 years, 12 years, and then have our teachers learn how to help transfer those deep reading skills to hybrid or digital screens, and really be consciously aware that we are building a biliterate brain. Until I know differently, that's how I want to preserve as we expand.
So, okay, we should all be building biliterate brains. But don't feel bad if you prefer podcasts to magazines or audiobooks to print. There's a spoken word renaissance going on right now. And coming up, Maryanne and I discuss why that's a good thing.
At LinkedIn, we know hiring is a big deal for your small business. Sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming. LinkedIn uses data that you can't find anywhere else to give you the best candidates, all so you can feel confident you're hiring the best person for the job. And even a little hiring bliss. See why 86% of small businesses who post a job on LinkedIn get a qualified candidate within a day. Post a job for free at linkedin.com/achieve. LinkedIn, your next great hire is here.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso. Gift magical mornings with Nespresso Virtuo Pop. Compact and stylish, Virtuo Pop is made to meet every morning coffee craving. From espresso to coffee, hot or iced, at the click of a button. And celebrate the season with Nespresso's limited edition coffee flavors. Sweet almond and hibiscus, cinnamon and candied tamarind, and festive double espresso. Magic in the making. Shop the holiday gift collection exclusively at Nespresso.com.
So there are a few areas of hopefulness that I see when I look out into the world. One of them actually is the world of podcasting. I see podcasting culture as really quite reminiscent of this Socratic
yes, it
courtyard,
is.
right? We had a wonderful conversation with Annie Murphy-Paul, who wrote a great book called The Extended Mind, in which she cited fascinating research by Hugo Mercier and Dan Sperber, showing that when we think individually, we have these cognitive blind spots, like confirmation bias, and so on, where we're very good at convincing ourselves of what we want to believe when we are thinking in isolation. But we're much better at being critical thinkers when interacting with others. And so when we think in groups, we are much less susceptible to these kinds of biases. So this push-pull of people having dialogue and listening to others, I think there are probably quite a few people, maybe some listeners now, for whom podcasts have replaced some amount of reading. And I would argue that's not necessarily a bad thing, because I think the podcast may be resuscitating some of the healthy elements of Socrates' courtyard.
I can't agree with you more, and I love the analogy. And I think it's also so exciting and hopeful to think that we are making these various courtyards available to people. I would, however, I don't want to use the word pushback, but I will use the term differ.
Okay.
Because I do differ from the idea that podcast is it can be an amplification of what was written, but you see, the act of writing itself is so generative. And so that's what I love about writing at its best. And that's what Toni Morrison said. Word work is sublime. It is generative. I think there is something extraordinary, miraculous, this inexpressible drive we have to use written language to propel our own thoughts. And I will say that is irreplaceable by any other genre, but that doesn't mean it can't be complemented by podcasts. I think podcasts will not, in my mind, replace either the writing or the reading of books that give us pause in a very particular way.
One other argument I would put forward is that the power of the human voice is extraordinary. And it's easy to forget that these modes of communication that we see as sacrosanct were always based on the technologies available at a given moment in time. So if audio recordings had been available several thousand years ago, that might have been chosen as a superior experience.
Sure.
And one of my favorite conversations we've had on the show is with John Colapinto, author of This is the Voice.
Right.
And he writes and speaks lyrically about the power of the human voice, which he calls molecular lasagna. Delivering, isn't that wonderful? Delivering all these layers of meaning and communication in parallel.
Yes.
And so talking with you, Maryanne, your writing is beautiful, but in some sense, your speech to me is even more beautiful. You have such varied levels of emphasis. If we were writing in text what you're saying right now, we'd need like 10 different levels of italics or bold font to express all these sort of levels of emphaticness. We can feel the warmth and generosity of your attention through your voice. So I think that though audio is worse, I think, for retention, and it makes rereading harder. And I think rereading is an important part of this deep reading experience. I do feel like there are extra layers of communication that are powerful and that maybe your sons would agree with.
I have never heard the term molecular lasagna, but I will savor it. And I certainly wouldn't have come up with lasagna, but he's absolutely correct. There is this auditory architecture to how we use our words. And when we think about the beginnings of language in the human being, the first aspect of language is music. The first thing that I almost gasped over was when my 6-week-old baby, I just happened to have a video right there taping David, and he was going, he was grasping music in our exchange. He was grasping what we call linguistics, prosody, but what it is the melodic contour that the voice gives language. And I haven't read This Is Your Voice. I really want to, but I couldn't agree more that there are special gifts that we might call the affordances of the voice, as well as the affordances of print or the screen.
Yes, I love that. Well, now that I've exercised all of my devil's advocacy, I want to confess, Maryanne, that I completely agree with you in terms of the importance of building biliterate brains in ourselves and our children and preserving deep reading. So important. Thank you so much, Maryanne, for your time today. It's just been delightful to talk with you.
It was truly a joy. It was a fertile miracle of communication.
Yes, it was, even though it was not in text format. Imagine that. That's right. And that's our show. To learn more about Maryanne's work, visit her website, MaryanneWolf.com. A quick note before I go, really a confession. When I was reading Maryanne's book, Reader Come Home, it occurred to me that she might see what we do here at the Next Big Idea Club as part of the problem. We, like you, don't have time to read as many books as we would like to. So we partner with the world's leading nonfiction authors to create 10 to 15-minute audio and text summaries of their books. This at first blush feels at odds with the slow, methodical, trance-like reading that Maryanne is all about. But the more I thought about it, the more I came to realize that the work we do isn't antithetical to deep reading. It's really a complement to it. More than 4 million books are published every year. 4 million. Deciding what to read can be as hard as finding time to read. That's where the Next Big Idea Club comes in. We're a collection of readers, journalists, former book editors, and we look far and wide to identify the very best new books from the best writers in the world. And then every day in our Next Big Idea app, we deliver the 5 key insights from a brand new book in 10 to 15 minutes of audio and text directly from the author. If it moves you, buy the book, go deeper. If not, tune in tomorrow for the next new book. Tell me what you think of this mission. Does it resonate for you? You can reach me at rufus@nextbigideaclub.com. Have you signed up for our newsletter on LinkedIn? Every Thursday morning, I take listeners behind the scenes of these episodes, provide additional insights and takeaways, and chat with curious folks like you. To subscribe, all you have to do is follow me, Rufus Griscom, on LinkedIn. On my profile page, you'll see a link to sign up for the newsletter. It's called The Next Big Idea. Today's episode was produced by Caleb Bissinger, sound designed by Mike Toda. The team at LinkedIn are ambassadors of empathy. I'm your host, Rufus Griscom. See you next week.
This episode is brought to you by Marqeta. When it comes to your payments provider, you can't afford to compromise. Marqeta's modern payment solutions flex with your business without the trade-offs. Stable and agile, secure and innovative, scalable and configurable. If they say you can't have it all, don't believe them. Your business demands more. Choose a payments provider that delivers more. Choose Marqeta. Visit marqeta.com/Spotify to learn more.
There's fishing. And then there's fishing. Out here, you're after dinner. Online, hackers are after your data. They'll bait you with fake emails, lookalike sites, anything to lure you in. But with Cisco Duo's end-to-end phishing-resistant access control, every login, every device, every user stays protected. Looks like no one's biting today. Cisco Duo. Phishing season is over. Learn more at duo.com.